Hi, Rachel.
Hello.
See, we're now streaming live on YouTube, so I can open the meeting. I'll call to order the Urban Renewal Commission meeting of January 26, 2021, and ask Ms. Riggs to conduct a roll call, please.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Present.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Here.
Commissioner Rachel Lyles Smith,
Here.
Commissioner Sean Cross,
Here.
Commissioner Doug Neely,
Here.
and Chair Frank O'Donnell.
Here. So tonight we have item number one, and that item is the election of the chair for 2021. I'd like to exercise a little liberty. Before we enter into that, I want to pass along some information. As many of you know, I would prefer if someone else would take that chair. I've occupied it for a number of years. I think that opportunity should be shared. It's an interesting position to occupy. Unlike some of the people running for mayor, present company excluded, these are not dictatorial positions. They are consensus positions. And I'm proud to say that everybody on this commission already knows that. So we'll do fine. I want to say that I've asked Tony for the future, Mr. Conkle, to provide a financial report because we need to know where we stand as a committee. And in the future, I believe the next meeting that'll be provided to us. I also think something that Mr. Conkle and I have discussed, and I hope you share, knowing that we're going to get a report on the urban renewal public engagement process. I look at what we've done, and I'm proud of what we've done. I'm proud that this commission saved the city close to $500,000, and I'm proud of many of the other actions we've taken. But I think we need a change of approach to things, and I hope that that in the future we construct, maybe with the help of the Oregon City 2040 plan, a vision for what we want this city to become, and rather than do fragmented pieces that don't really fit together, come up with a total plan. And instead of happily entertaining anyone that comes to our door with a project, we come up with an approach to making this city what we want it to be, and then we put those kind of projects out for an RFQ or RFP. So I took that liberty, and that's the last liberty I'll take. I'm going to open it up, the discussion items. Item number one, our election of the chair for 2021, and that opens with a staff report. So if we can have that, we'll proceed.
Yes, thank you, Chair O'Donnell. So the commission does at the beginning of each year elect a chair and a vice chair. This was kind of a unusual year where the Urban Renewal Commission elected to have a vice chair come in October. And I believe that it was the agreement of the Urban Renewal Commission that that person would serve through the year 2021. And then in January, which is now at the first meeting, we would elect the chair for the year 2021 to serve for the chair of the Urban Renewal Commission. So I would like to open that up for nominations.
Is anyone present disagree with that approach to tonight, that we are simply going to elect the chair only and that the vice chair will continue to serve? There's no
Mr.
objection.
Chairman, as long as Mr. Cross is agreeable to that. I don't know if he was aware that that was going to be extended.
Mr. Cross, would you care to comment?
I mean, I don't mind if Mr. Neely would like to do it, since this will be of a 2-year term, but if not, I don't mind doing it.
Mr. Neely, I see you had your hand up. Your comment, please.
No, I was actually going to make a nomination. You said you were opening up to nominations. No, I have no interest in being chair in this year.
Well, then, as current chair, let me open, and along with Katie, let me open this up for nominations. So the chair is entertaining nominations for the year 2021. Mr. Neely.
Yes, I nominate Denise McGriff.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a second. Do we have any other nominations? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Denise McGriff has been proposed as chair for 2021 and has been seconded. Please call the roll, Katie.
Yep. Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Sean Cross,
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Doug Neely,
Aye.
and Chair Frank O'Donnell.
Aye. So at this point, Katie, would I turn the meeting over to the 2021 chair, Mrs. McGriff?
You would, yes.
I yield the chairmanship to Denise McGriff. Denise,
I
it's all
hope,
you.
I hope she wanted it.
She voted yes.
Too late now.
Let's just say, my fellow commissioners, I felt a little bit like you all were a collective sniper. I had been tied to the track. Poor Nell going, save me. So I don't see Dudley Do Right riding to the rescue. So I will graciously accept the chair of the Urban Renewal Commission and strive to do as good a job or better job than Commissioner O'Donnell, who's done an excellent job.
Thank you for that.
So with that being said, I would like to call for item number 2, which is a review of the next phase of the urban renewal public engagement process as presented by the Leland Consulting Group. And Mr. Conkle, are you going to introduce that?
I will go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Graham.
Good evening, members of the Urban Renewal Commission. James Graham, Economic Development Manager, Oregon City. It's my pleasure to introduce the Leland Group and colleagues. We have Sam Brookham, as well as Andy Parks, and Anise Matas is with us, and they will present, they will make the presentation for tonight. As you know, we started this process in October 29th, 2020, and it's been 3 months hence, so here we are. So I'll turn it over to Sam.
Thank you very much, James. Well, I think it's the first time we're meeting with all of you this year, so Happy New Year, everybody. We have a brief presentation just to run through, and I'll get into the sort of expected format and time we wish to spend on a few things. So I'm just going to share my screen here. And please let me know that everybody can see that.
Yep.
Excellent. First step accomplished. Okay, so the agenda here, we're really just going to talk briefly about, well, the purpose of this meeting, so a few schedule updates, go over briefly some of the findings that we've had throughout these activities, and many of these will not be new, therefore why it's brief. And as far as we understand, you have the memo that we put together summarizing activities today. Certainly don't wish to rehash or go over any of that in great detail. So we'll leave the bulk of the meeting up for discussion to talk about anything in that memo itself, plus just a few things that Anise will run through and facilitate with you all as well. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. So really what we want to get out of this is again, a quick review of the activities and the information that we've collected to date through these outreach activities and the background analysis that's accompanied each of those. And then we will really want to establish the course of action for the next phase of the urban renewal study. So as a quick reminder, big red star here is where we're at in that outreach schedule. The bulk of the engagement has happened. We've had focus groups, stakeholder interviews, 2 community group presentations, the town halls with you all, our first community workshop. We've had an online survey active for a few months, and we'll talk a little bit about what we heard from that. Really going forward is we have a business alliance meeting scheduled for March, the end of March. We're hoping for another community workshop in February, directed by some of the things that you will decide in this meeting. And then that'll accompany an online survey, or vice versa, rather. Just a reminder, we started in August. All of this has been remote, as you know, with the pros and cons of that. We continue to try and innovate best we can. But based on the information that I think we've got thus far, we've really been in this first phase, what we'll call education. We've certainly delved into the analytical piece that's accompanied, many of the things that we've heard in that educational phase. But I think the main thing that we will really want to focus on now is these facilitated discussions to really delve into some of the core topic areas that have emerged as part of that first phase. So I just want to reiterate, much of the analytical work or the background research, data analysis that would have accompanied some of the decisions or options, that's really been completed by ourselves, Andy. So we have that information to fall back on. And then going forwards, really what's left is that decision. So if we keep those three distinct phases in mind, what we're looking at really is that last phase, the culmination of all this work, will probably be March, maybe April, probably April. So a few schedule updates. Again, community workshop, a bit more in-depth analysis on a few alternatives if we choose to, with whatever path we choose to proceed with. Business lines presentation and the final community workshop, really to kind of tie a bow on everything, and then commission decision. So what are these activities today? Once again, this is all in the memo we handed out. So you're all familiar with everything we've been doing, but just to reiterate the sort of the breadth of outreach efforts that have been conducted, include the community presentation where we had 20 attendees. We had the stakeholder interviews with the affected taxing districts. We've made best efforts to include the boards of those taxing districts as well. The community meetings, or the community meeting Q&A, where the joint meeting with had about 15 attendees. The town hall drop-in sessions where we had upwards of 40 attendees total. The online survey that we had 42 responses for, and then the project website and the social media, and the questions, comments that were summarized in that memo. I just wanted to underscore all the different ways in which Kristen Brown at the city had been advertising these opportunities. This is primarily through social media, but we had updated project websites, email blasts, and you all, of course, were encouraged to spread the word about your individual town hall events. So I think with all of these things together, we managed to probably get a pretty good idea of a few key points and topics that on which to sort of delve into more. Of course, urban renewal to the broader public can sometimes be an inaccessible technical topic of conversation, and I think we've done a pretty good job of getting to that point of understanding. So I think a couple of things I wanted to highlight in terms of the survey responses in particular. One of the key takeaways here is that we've had a pretty good proportion of respondents identify that a continuation of urban renewal in Oregon City as a tool is desired. 75%, again, 3/4 of those respondents think that funds should aid in development assistance programs, and then a pretty high proportion of people call for site-specific project support as well. So in terms of those takeaways, again, it's the general support, but also that there should be greater accountability and transparency, and also that if you start talking about specific projects, focusing on those site-specific development projects and transportation infrastructure in particular are a couple of things that float to the surface. In terms of questions and comments, there's about 7 key or core topics or categories that we can categorize the questions and comments that have come in throughout these outreach efforts. And so the first is procedural. We've got boundary adjustments and district closure and financial, and there's 3 on the next page too. But just highlighting some of the things that popped up in each of those include things like timeline. Can we place end dates? What are the types of different amendments that might be made, and what do those mean in terms of adding or removing projects? What is the timeline for and requirements for creating new districts? Are there maximum size adjustments allowed? Can we include specific new areas in terms of district closure? How are any unspent funds distributed? What does potentially reestablishing the frozen base mean, and what are the implications for that? Then there's some financial things like spending capacity implications for including your areas. There's things like a return on investment for different types of projects, and then other available funding mechanisms as well. In terms of taxes, there's school funding and the implications on school funding from urban renewal, impacts on homeowners tax and public services. Then there's a number of different, there was a number of different questions and comments that specifically pertain to urban renewal owned property. Most of those were about a couple of properties on 2nd Street, I believe, and sort of operational and maintenance and some more financially specific points of conversation as well. City Hall expenses, maintenance, rent, and then projects in terms of specific projects, comments and questions about affordable housing, how funds were spent on the Cove, whether how funds were spent in downtown specifically for traffic improvements, and then the ability to fund new projects going forward. So there's a very quick summary. All the details and the responses are in that memo that's been shared. So I think now that's pretty much the context background that I wanted to cover with everybody. What I want to do for the most part now is hand it over to Anais, who will talk a little bit about next steps and then hopefully facilitate a bit of a discussion with you all, so we can identify some kind of priorities, get some direction, and kind of facilitate a dialogue.
So before she goes forward, thank you, Sam. Does anybody have anything that's burning right now that they want to ask before we move on to the next part? Commissioner O'Donnell, are you going to unmute?
Yeah, I didn't know whether to speak or not. I want this to be effective. I don't know how to increase our engagement with the community. We spent $83,000 and I don't know exactly how many warm bodies we got outside of our own presenters and staff. And I want it to be as effective as it can be. I have my own feelings about what the community needs, and I'll hold those comments for later. We have the balance of this contract to fulfill. My goal would be, how do we make it maximize its productivity and extend out beyond those we've already reached, which in my mind is unfortunately a small number, as each of you who presented knew that we got small attendance, although I think the one OCBA meeting was good, and I think I see another one scheduled. So I'm just going to remain silent for the moment and just discuss things as they come up, and my insights I would share with you as how I think we can make urban renewal successful. So I'll just sit silently and listen to the balance of the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Anybody else?
I have a question, but I don't know if it'll be answered, so I'll throw it out and then you can decide if you answer it now or later. How about that? If you're going to address it in the presentation, then it can wait. But one thing that I feel like has been missing in the materials, and if I missed it, I apologize, is I'm trying to understand when you interviewed all the overlapping taxing districts, it's not clear to me at what point those overlapping taxing districts are triggered, where we would have to go back to them for approval, or like we've talked about them, we know they exist and we know that they are affected by this, but it's just not clear to me, like, can we do anything we want, or at what point do we, and I don't think the answer is yes, but at what point do we have to go back to the overlapping taxing districts and get approval, or maybe we don't, I don't know. If you're going to address it, it can wait though.
No, I mean, we can address that right now. I think that's a good question, and it's certainly fits in with some of the sort of preliminary information. So Andy can jump in here, but basically there is no legal requirement for you to re-engage the overlapping taxing districts. The only time that you would do so is if you were to make a decision that would trigger a substantial amendment, at which point you would go through that entire process again for basically creating a new plan. If you want to proceed with the project as is, the district as is and the plan as is, that's fine. It's really just doing a sort of due diligence and kind of keeping the taxing districts in the loop from a being friendly to those taxing districts, so to speak. If you were to do a minor amendment, again, wouldn't necessarily trigger a requirement, legally speaking, or regulatory speaking, to re-engage those taxing districts either.
Okay, that's fine, thanks.
And I would say the one caveat to that is if, for example, there is a new project in the plan, or if you decide to proceed and include a new plan that is a public building, for example, say a fire station or another building for public service, then again, then and only then would the 3 out of the 4 biggest taxing districts have to essentially agree. And you would be able to do that with a minor amendment.
Sam, isn't there also a another little caveat that since our urban renewal plan was created, there's been some minor changes in the state law, and I think there also might be a trigger for that as well. That if we did something completely different, we would come under the newer regulations rather than the ones that were in when we adopted our plan.
Yeah, and that's as far as I can recall, that is the 3 out of the 4 taxing districts and the public building requirement. So back in 2007, when the plan was in place, you didn't need that sign off for the City Hall project, for example, but now you would. Andy, do you want to step in? Are there any other requirements that would be held to? I don't believe there are there?
No, I believe you've covered it, Sam. And I think, again, anything that would trigger a substantial plan amendment, as well as the public building, the substantial plan amendment, even in going in through that process, you would re-engage with those agencies. However, you do not need their approval to establish an urban renewal agency. With respect to a public building, if that was something you wanted to include in the plan, whether it's a substantial amendment or not, you would need 3 of the 4 highest paying districts to agree to funding of that public building with urban renewal money. And that would be with the city, the county, the school district, and the fire district, I believe, are the 4 highest paying.
That help, Commissioner Lyle Smith? Okay. All right. If there aren't any other questions at this point, then we will go to stage 2.
I just wanted to.
Oh, Doug, do you have a question?
Yeah. My recollection that a minor amendment would, just in one case, if you traded an area for another, as long as it didn't increase it by overall 1% is a minor amendment. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
All right. Anise, are you ready?
Looks like Frank has his hand up.
Who does?
Frank.
Oh, okay. He just shifted places on my screen.
I would simply say we held a number of meetings and many I don't think any of us attended every meeting. We delved into interesting discussions at each meeting. Doug talking about the increase in the size, we can actually increase up to 8.9 acres. There's interesting discussions about resetting the frozen base, possibly freeing up some portion of the funds we had accumulated. And it's just so much information that I don't know if any one of us has a complete grasp on it. But, in the end, our goal is to utilize this tool effectively for the betterment of the city. And to do that, we have to get the support of the community. And then the question is how to best accomplish that. So that's just a brief summary of my take on all the meetings we held and the many that I attended, although I did not attend all. So thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. Let's, are you ready?
I am.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for having us again this evening. So I'll walk us through a couple of things here, next steps, but then also talk a bit, or at least have you converse with us about some key items for discussion regarding our next steps for community outreach. So as we had mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, this first phase of the study really focused on providing education and information about urban renewal and the urban renewal district. So that we really focused on collecting as many questions and comments from the community at large, which really helps us refine key messages and informational materials, and also just gauge interest in a variety of different topics. As Commissioner Frank O'Donnell had mentioned, there's a lot of information that was discussed at all of these town hall events and the community meeting and on the survey. So there's quite a bit of information out there and there's quite a bit to talk about. So our hope is that this phase 2 of community engagement takes us one step further, where we start allowing a bit more in-depth discussion on some key topics, and as a result be able to establish some community priorities based on this foundational understanding of what urban renewal is. So our phase 2 community outreach, we're going to continue our community presentations. As Sam had mentioned, we have our third one scheduled in March with the Oregon City Business Alliance. We're going to use this opportunity to, with OCBA, to continue sharing just basic information about urban renewal, but also start moving the conversation in the direction that we deem after this meeting. We're also going to be hosting another community event, and then we also have another second online survey that will accompany that community meeting and will run for the duration of this phase, similar to how it was done in the first phase. But before I move on to more of the content-oriented discussion, I think that there is definitely some, in terms of engaging more folks and getting more people around the table around when it comes to this topic, we can certainly think about some other methods of engaging or at least advertising these opportunities. Kristen Brown has done a really great job of doing her best to advertise a lot of these or all of these opportunities. Just a quick refresh that we do have a project website that's been quite regularly updated with the videos for each of those town hall events, as well as all the materials we prepared. We have social media posts that were put out by Kristen. We had a media release, and then also through the first online survey, we were starting to pull together a project email list that'll help develop or help us send out email blasts or have a audience to send out email blasts. So there are a variety of different tools that are in the works for advertising these meetings, but there are some additional things we might want to consider as we think about the next community meeting and the online survey. I'll offer a couple of ideas, one of which is potentially considering a direct mailing along with a pamphlet with the information from our 1 or 2 page FAQ that we developed at the beginning of the process. And then there's also the opportunity to potentially identify more specific stakeholders that we would want to maybe interview or communicate with that just help us continue having quality discussion with folks that are engaged in this topic, engaged in this topic in more intimate ways. So those are some ideas, and I'm happy to just put those out there, but then also loop back with our project team and continue brainstorming some additional opportunities and avenues to get the word out beyond kind of what we've been doing so far. So the next slide is kind of where the meat of the discussion goes, but essentially our hope for this evening was to focus on the type of information that you as a commission would like to have or know in order to make an informed decision. So we know there's a lot of topics at hand. There's a lot of different ideas and priorities that could be up for consideration or up for discussion. Basically, we need to know, what are the key topics that you want more information about, and then we need to collaboratively identify what are those choices, and also understand what are some urban renewal commission decision points versus some community decision points. We identified at the top a couple of topics that we could potentially go out for further discussion with the community. It could be around district timeline. It could be around types of projects. Our first online survey just started kind of grasping at like types of projects, but we could certainly move more in that direction and start identifying or having folks help us prioritize types of projects. Maybe we want to go out and have a discussion about potential new specific projects that might be included, or maybe we want to also have a conversation about urban renewal geography or the boundary. So these are kind of some topics that we've pulled out, but also we're looking to you as a commission to help guide us in understanding what are the things that you really want to know more about. And then from there, we can start crafting what are those choices, and then how can we best organize and design our engagement activities like our community meeting and our online survey to best communicate these priorities and these decision points for the community. There's a lot of information out there. We certainly won't be able to cover all of it, but maybe there are 3 to 4 specific items that really merit some key decision points and key priorities or choices to be made. So that is kind of our opening for you to just help us inform or help us identify what are some key ideas or topic areas that you think would be really worthwhile exploring and would be really beneficial for you as a commission in order to make a better and more informed decision. And so I will kind of open it up for discussion and kind of help facilitate. Frank, please.
So I think any discussion, the starting point is what is our financial status? And that's why I've asked Mr. Conkle and our financial officers to start with making everyone aware of our financial status, assets and liabilities. What do we have at our disposal? What do we have to work with? And that's where it starts. And that can be a decision point even to, if you want to close the existing district, are you at a position where you can do that? So that's where I would start. I have found in my discussions with many of the strongest opponents to urban renewal, that their difficulty with the concept is we continue to collect monies with no project whatsoever, and they don't see us providing a concrete benefit. I don't look for the average citizen with busy lives and raising families and trying to stay above water. I don't look for them to immerse themselves in the ins and outs of urban renewal. I think the decision point that needs to be before them is, what type of projects would you support? You have to give them something that says that sounds good to them. Let's do that. And I think even the strongest opponents, if we talk about a project-based approach, they won't oppose it. They would actually be in favor of it. So the question is, how do we arrive at that, back to that opening statement I made tonight, which is, what's our vision for the city and how does urban renewal fit into accomplishing that vision? And that's just a broad observation. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to take a little prerogative and jump in as well, because it's piggybacks on what you're saying, Commissioner O'Donnell. I think in addition to knowing what our financial status is I don't think I have ever seen an inventory of all the properties that we own. And I think it would be helpful to have a one-page fact sheet. And maybe that's something that our staff already has, which basically would include, the size, obviously the address, any planning, zoning type information, access to public facilities and services. For instance, we own a piece of property that we know has an easement through it. So basic things like that. I know that people are very anxious to jump into having a project list, but I think we need to have a basis and some grounding in what we already own and what we would reasonably like to see happen to those based on where they are, what they are, all of sort of those things. And again, that creates the basis, along with financial information, of what do we have to work with. I mean, I think in my head, I have a pretty good idea of where all of our properties are, but I forgot about those two houses we have over on across from Moot. And I thought, oh yeah, that's right. So it's all of that information that I think would provide a good basis for us to begin a discussion before we even start dreaming big about projects. I think we've got, as Commissioner O'Donnell said, we've got to figure out what is the vision generally that we'd like to see. Plus, we also want to know what our community says. So I'm not willing to dive into using a favorite phrase, the big shiny thing, right away before I know what we're dealing with. I see he's smiling.
If I could respond to that, Chair.
Sure, your hand's still up.
Well, I thought I put it down, but anyhow, what I'll say is that very information you're talking about comes under the title of assets and liabilities. And I have actually requested that information from our previous wonderful financial guy, Wyatt Parno, and he has provided it. And when I talk about assets and liabilities, I don't talk about just cash on hand or revenue streams. I talked about real property too. So that's available for our perusal. And I think every member should have that at their disposal. And that is a good starting point. And the other thing I've said is, I don't think we need to hit a home run out of the chute. We need to demonstrate a success. It doesn't have to be $40 million. Maybe it's some smaller figure that urban renewal has made a success. So having said that, I will once again silence myself.
Well, I think we have successes. Commissioner Neely, please.
I just agreeing with what you said, and also, I mean, at the time I've been on, I've seen the one project proposal that's been forwarded before you at 10th and Main. I don't know if there are any other project. I don't know if there are any other project proposals on other properties, and I'd like to have that information as well.
Commissioner Smith?
You're muted.
It's our favorite term. You're still muted.
I usually keep it unmuted, and then I always think I'm going to get in trouble, so I turn it off. All right. So I guess one of the things that I think is one of the most important to get out of this process and going forward is you know, why we went into this process to begin with, which was a response to the voters that basically said, stop spending urban renewal money. And so we have to have a response to that. And so, you know, the former kind of position was, well, it's a state mandate, we can do whatever we want. I'm sorry, that's not a good enough answer to the voters that said stop. And so when we come out of this process, and this process was hopefully to get to a point where we would understand what the citizens actually think we should be doing to fix it. Unfortunately, I don't think this process is going to tell us that because it's not getting out to as many people as we really need it to. And the people it's getting out to are people that are more probably supportive of urban renewal than the alternate. But I don't want to come out of this process saying, oh, okay, we've listened to people and now we're going to go ahead, do whatever we were doing before, without some acknowledgement of what we learned in this process, a response really specifically to the community that says, yes, we know that there was a concern in putting these limitations on the city. This is how we're fixing it. This is how we're moving forward. This is how we're addressing it. And without doing that, I don't think we're going to get buy-in to support these projects. And I think if we do this project-based strategy and we focus on small projects, forget, you know, right immediately these massive projects that have been so divisive in the city, focus on our vacant properties, our infill, make some progress on and accomplishing some little projects to get the buy-in back from the community, and then have that build the larger ones. But we have to have a dialogue with the public that continues beyond just this little piece. Because without that, I think we're going to prevent ourselves from really moving forward. If we just tackle, you know, another giant project and it goes nowhere, we haven't fixed anything. And so I think we tackle something, you know, a small project that we can get buy-in from the community, say, we're gonna test this out. We want the community support on this specific project and get us success and move forward from there. But I think we really need to have a plan to address the public's original concerns that I just don't think we've addressed yet.
I don't disagree with that. I think we also need to look at how we can, I think our plan is quite deficient in many areas. And I think as part of the response to the community, Commissioner Smith, Rocky Smith, I think we have to also indicate to the community what we are going to do to fix the deficiencies that are in the current plan. There are parts of it, I think, that need to be rewritten. I think we need to reframe the plan from the standpoint of the discussion that was listed as a question. We need to look at creating an end date. We need to look at a preface phrase, a premise that Commissioner O'Donnell addressed in terms of this is what we'd like to accomplish. I mean, you're identifying the question, what is the problem we are trying to solve? And the problem we are trying to solve is understanding where our community is with urban renewal, even in this limited capacity, and answering your question of what did we learn? How can we make it better? And how do we see what do we see moving forward? I think those are three fundamental questions that we need to get back to the community. And I think showing them the thing that I haven't heard so far in our education process is we haven't really talked about the successes that we've made with urban renewal. And I think that that's something that needs to be brought out. We do have projects that we did that were successful, that have helped revitalize some of the businesses and some of the areas of our city. And I think we need to look at that. You know, we also know where we kind of went off the rails, and we can look at the lessons learned from Black Point Inn. We can look at the lessons learned with some of the stuff with the depot. And the question gets fundamentally back to, again, have we made progress in understanding where we need to make a correction? Commissioner Lyle Smith or Commissioner Cross, anything?
Yes, I have my hand raised.
Yep, I see it.
So I would agree with Commissioner Smith. We were both campaigning at the same time and took on this issue of needing to address the voter concerns. And I would agree with him that I don't believe that this process yet has checked that box. For me, I think going forward, I think the biggest concerns from the general population will be about the overlapping taxing districts, the school district and the fire department, primarily. And so I really believe that for me as a decision maker, I need pros and cons of that, how we can work with particularly those two taxing districts, to show that we have partnered with them, that we care about them, that we've listened to them, and that we're not devaluing or degrading the services that they provide by having urban renewal. So I think there's a balance there. Like if we move forward with urban renewal, then we have to be able to demonstrate how we are supporting those taxing districts in particular, and not harming our children or not harming the people in order to receive fire service. So the whole premise of resetting the timeline or the baseline, I think we need some real conversation about that as far as pros and cons, and is that a maneuver that we can demonstrate of how we're partnering with these taxing districts to help them out by resetting the tax base. And so that's one item. And I also think even talking to them about their projects, I know, let them be, they need to be a partner with us. So I'm particularly interested in projects that they could benefit from urban renewal. That would show a partnership with these taxing districts. I think in general, if we are asking the public for more information, I think we need to provide examples of projects that have a good return on investment. It would be part education, but at the same time, giving them some good examples, and all of us too, of projects that would be, because it's one of the key factors of urban renewal being successful, is that it has a good return on investment, and acknowledge projects that maybe aren't a financial return on investment on paper, but if we're going to have projects like that, we got to tie them to something that, like, where they benefit all of downtown, for example. I can think of the Quiet Rail as a project example for that. And I guess the last thing I'll say is, if you're going to the community and asking for more input, I would love to have a community conversation about a vision statement. What is our community's vision statement? We could probably craft one, but I think it's important that our community have buy-in. I do have concerns about the number of people we're reaching, but we've talked a lot about vision, but I would like our community to be part of that defining of what the vision is.
May I respond?
Sure.
So those are all fantastic points, and I'm hearing a bunch of different directions and ideas for types of information that would be useful, both internal information, but then also community-wide information. I heard some interest in having further conversations with the taxing districts in terms of, identifying their own projects and what sorts of, as Rachel mentioned, partnerships would really be needed in order to move, understand where urban renewal is going. Also, the conversation about a vision statement. OC 2040 is is about to kick off their own visioning process that is community-wide and community-based. Starting tomorrow, actually, is when they're going to be meeting to talk about that. So there is an opportunity to put finger on that pulse and see where that goes. And yeah, I mean, in terms of just what an overall vision would be. I also heard that there's this more internal information that's needed for the commission in terms of an inventory of all the properties that is owned by the Urban Renewal District. Like as Denise mentioned, a fact sheet that just provides more information about current projects. As well as a need to rewrite or maybe reframe the overall plan. These are all great ideas, and I guess my question back to you is, what should we be going and asking the community about, given these pieces of information that you as a commission want internally, but then also pieces of information that you want externally? And I guess one other item that I did hear be mentioned a couple of times was the timeline of urban renewal. And maybe that is a point of discussion that would be, that would be, would make sense for the community. But also there may be more.
Let me throw one more on the list. Since Clackamas Fire District is beyond our jurisdiction and they apply to other cities, I would assume, and maybe Mr. Conkle knows this, there are other cities that have urban renewal. I believe that Milwaukee does, and I believe they serve them. So I don't want this question of how urban renewal affects them, because I know it does, but I'd also want to know about what the other jurisdictions, not how it affects them, but other jurisdictions that are being affected. So maybe what the fire district is looking at is maybe some sort of cumulative effect. So I'm trying to remember what other cities, I can see the district boundary in my brain, but I'm just trying to think of what other jurisdictions they cover. Because I know there's other urban renewal districts that affect them as well. So that would be an interesting fact to know, because I don't want them to use sort of the divide and conquer thing, but maybe it's an overall, just a quick look for us so that we know what ground we're on if we do talk to them further. I mean, I think it's valuable. I think that's a great idea. And I know they mentioned in their interview that they thought they had a project that we might do. And I thought, well, gee, you forgot about the fire station that we spent urban renewal on, and maybe it's time to spend a little more money on it, because it's showing. And I know we've had some leaks and a few little tweak things that need to happen down there, but that fire station was, in my opinion, a nice little gift. Although and I'm obviously partial to it since I live very close to it, but that's something that we have done. The school district, I think, is in a different situation because their boundary is mostly our boundary, and the part that's outside that might be in the county, I don't think is affected by urban renewal in Jennings Lodge or Oak Grove. And then certainly Redland is not within any boundary that's affected by urban renewal, but obviously the county has urban renewal, and maybe the fire district affects some of that area, has something to do with that area as well. So that's sort of another baseline piece of information. I think that would be helpful to us if that's something that our city could make available. Sean's got a question, or he maybe knows the answer to that.
No, it's just, if we're going to talk about special districts, I thought we were just coming up with topics, but like with the school district, it'd be interesting to know exactly dollar for dollar, what does it really affect the local school district for having urban renewal? And then for the fire district in particular, I mean, I like fire, but what was their expectation when they became the special district serving Oregon City in regards to urban renewal because the urban renewal district was there before the
Yeah.
fire district came in. So the question becomes, in their calculations from their financial, when they brought it to the voters to vote to be the fire district and no longer
It was
be
a
under
question
contract
that
with
was
the city,
asked.
the question
Yeah.
would be, didn't you expect it to go on for 30 years from the time that you did this, or 35 years, or did they expect it to go on for 10 years and all of a sudden to have it done and then get this big windfall of money coming back like every
I
general
am
fund?
remembering some
That would,
conversations.
that's just something that would be nice to know.
Yeah. I remember some conversations that were when they were trying to sell this to us, and I mean that in the most benign way, that they felt that they would be able to fit right into our system. We had a renewal, so they were aware of that, so that is a good point. I've forgotten about that they came in after, because we had does Lake Oswego served by Tualatin Valley?
No, they have their own fire district.
Okay, well, I know we had Tualatin Valley and there was some issue with urban renewal with them as well, but not to the degree that we're hearing about it now. So again, that's a excellent point. Maybe Tony has a little more background on that.
No, Mr. Cross had brought that up before, and I was hoping that he would bring it up again because it's a pretty valid point that the rates were set, and it's not like we created the district after the fact.
Denise, one more thing, if I may. I know the current superintendent of the Oregon City schools has never had any issues with our urban renewal district. He stated so before, and if there are some ways we can benefit them, of course, that's great. But there's been no negative feedback from the current, in fact, positive feedback from the current superintendent.
Commissioners, what is your pleasure?
I'd like to say a couple words, Chair.
On there, or do we want to try to prioritize what we'd like to know or where we want to go? Mr. O'Donnell.
I had an interesting conversation with Chief Band and actually talked about surrounding communities and their use of urban renewal. And it seems like Wilsonville apparently used it and they constructed a public building. But I honestly feel that if we enter into a public building construction, I think we get a knee-jerk reaction that would equate that to the city hall and we would be doomed. And I like the idea. I hear a common theme of demonstrating a success, but I also hear a common theme of let's make these individual pieces fit together. Let's not embark on a project in one place only to realize later that that doesn't fit into the total scheme of things. So I think the OC 2040 piece is huge, and in determining what the city shall be is the first step in that, and then use these individual components, whether it be 10th and Main, 12th and Main, the area out along Abernathy, out towards, how do we fit those pieces together to accomplish that ultimate goal? And I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
If I may, just to jump in here, I think that Commissioner O'Donnell pretty much hit the nail on the head in terms of, well, in keeping with what I was about to say. But when we think about urban renewal, it's a tool to implement a vision rather than a visioning process. So as we think about the 2007 plan, that was implementing the 2004 Oregon City Futures strategy. And I think, as Anais said, there is a great opportunity to piggyback on the OC 2040 piece, but also something that we can highlight that I think gets maybe to the discussion of deficiencies in the original plan is to kind of revisit the existing projects in the plan and what that vision statement said, whether it was comprehensive or not, and ask the community whether that still applies. I think that could be an important and beneficial discussion to have. Are there pieces of that that apply, and perhaps that's an initial conversation with Mule before we take that to the community, and then if projects don't apply, then are there projects to be taken out and or replaced? And these things all sort of fit together. When we're talking about timeline, we're also talking about prioritizing projects, and we're also talking about potential new projects, but also projects to be removed from the plan. And as we talk about geography, that's really the last thing on the agenda, really, because you don't necessarily just amend the boundary of a plan without a project in mind. You amend the boundary of the district because you want to implement a specific project that is outside the current boundary, or apply existing projects to a broader area. So they all sort of fit together, but I think it's important to keep that the 2007 bones as there in the forefront as useful context to kind of build from, because that's essentially what we're doing.
Is there any general agreement on that? Just so you know, Sam, I wasn't talking about tossing out the whole plan. I was just saying we need to do some wordsmithing and some kind of repackaging it. But it's
Yes.
some validity. So do we want to, for our next meeting, to take a look at that and basically see if that's something that still rings true to us, or whether we want to change it? I think that's a good place to start, if you all agree to that. Yes, no, maybe. Mr. Graham?
Urban renewal has been successful in all over the country and in different areas of the nation. And the vision for urban renewal in most of those places has been to create jobs, broaden tax base, create an environment for future growth. It's supposed to speak to the aspirations of the citizens and what they want for their lives. 2020, the 2020 comprehensive plan seems to speak to the physical plant of the city. But urban renewal speaks to the aspirations and economic vitality of the people who live here. And the vision can be as simple as that. Urban renewal also, the reason why it lasts as long as it does is to create the value in the projects that it creates as a consequence of the vision, and speaking to the aspiration of the people. That's why it lasts so long. There are consequences to restarting an urban renewal and starting all over. There are advantages for keeping what you've got, because you can do it provides more flexibility to you if you keep what you've got legally going forward. But if you change it, and then the new legislation is impacted, or it impacts the new legislation impacts the existing urban renewal, or the new urban renewal, and there are more limitations. So those are fundamental things to keep in mind. But it is designed to speak to the aspirations of the people who live here.
Further discussion?
May I?
Sure.
Would there be an opportunity then, based on kind of the direction of this conversation, the desire to identify or have community vision identified more broadly, to focus the next phase of engagement on more specific stakeholder groups? It sounds like there is a desire to have more in-depth conversations with certain taxing districts. Is that maybe a direction that you as a commission would like to go in the second phase, is to continue, or at least, continue a discussion with certain or all taxing districts further to identify more of those pros and cons that seemingly have not yet been fully answered? Is that, I guess, a potential direction to use this phase 2 work in?
If I might, thank you. I guess, was that Denise? Are you recognizing me?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead, Commissioner Neely.
I guess I don't have the same concerns that Rachel Lyle-Smith has. Unless we could demonstrate we're going to do something that would actually benefit the school district or the fire district, then that's a discussion to have. I don't really see that happening in the current location of the urban renewal district. And like I said, I think Clackamas Fire District could be concerned if we formed a new one, but I'm not sure that they have those much concerns about the current. And I know that at least the superintendent of the school district does not have concerns. So I'm wondering if we're trying to fix a wound that really isn't there.
Can I address Mr. Neely?
Please.
My comments. So even if maybe we don't have projects, but I feel like our community needs to hear that they support urban renewal. Because I think there's a concern that we are taking money away from the school district, and we're taking money away from kids, and we're taking money, and if we're addressing the folks who did not vote for urban renewal, then it's important that our message be clear if we're going forward. One, how are we fixing the problems that cause those folks, how are we, what's our performance measures? What are we putting in place to make sure to improve and fix the problems of the past? So that's one. And the other thing is to make sure that our message includes some support and buy-in from, I think, the taxing districts. Maybe it's not that they have a project in the hunt. A couple of them mentioned projects in their comments, but I still think our message going forward, I can't support urban renewal going forward if we're not able to address some of these things that I believe were at the core of that no vote. I hope that better explains.
Commissioner Rocky Smith, I think you had your hand up next. And then Commissioner O'Donnell.
On the same point, yeah, I don't know it's necessarily the viewpoint of the district itself, but the viewpoint of the citizens interpreting that, or the questions that have come up. And I'll point this out. So we had Doug Neely commenting about the superintendent, which is, true in some of the comments that I've heard from the superintendent, but here's the message from the school district. And this came up in actually my community forum, this idea that the state replaces the money. And so here's what the school district said. For foregone tax revenue, the school district understands that while it is true that the state general fund has to make up the difference, the state distributes fewer funds to all the districts during the urban renewal plan. So that's saying something opposite of what we've heard sometimes from the school district. And then you clearly say from the fire district, two main things that stood out. The financial impact of urban renewal is significant. So it's really the messages that the community is getting and interpreting that is more of the issue than necessarily the district's viewpoint.
Could I come back? I think a greater concern. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Hang on, Commissioner Neely. Mr. O'Donnell, is it okay if Mr. Neely responds, or would you like to go ahead and go? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I think the concern in the fire district, and I think it's a legitimate one, whenever is the district going to close? Whenever are they going to get those benefits? And that I understand. When I interviewed, I mentioned maybe it's time to close the Main Street area. It might be in terms of an exchange for another area, but so that we can get those revenues back to those districts. And I can understand that's a concern, because the downtown urban area, urban renewal district, in one form or another has existed there for decades.
Well, that gets to my question then about cumulative effect of urban renewal districts that affect Clackamas Fire District. It's not just us. And I
Right.
need to make our community understand that if there are other urban renewal districts that impact their budget, we don't need to be bearing that burden alone. I mean, it's just information I want to know. I think I know the answer that is yes, there are other urban renewal districts that affect them. It just isn't us alone. So Commissioner O'Donnell.
Well, I certainly agree with Doug Neely on everything he said. And I also agree with Commissioner Rocky Smith, because I was in that circular argument about the schools, about, yeah, the state does supplement the funds, but does the overall pool of money from which they can do that, does that become smaller as a result of urban renewal? So do we have to this was never designed to be a sales job, it was designed to be a fact-finding job, but that's a valid question. And as far as the fire district, that's a valid question too. And you have to overcome those things if you seek to advance the program. I think part of this is going to have to be almost a mea culpa, like an acknowledgement of what have we done wrong in the past, and we're not going to do that wrong in the future, and how people feel about the city hall piece. Well, let's say we're listening and we address their concerns, and perception is reality. And I think that I know Ms. Mathis has said, do you want me to revisit the taxing districts? But quite honestly, already in the report, they've contacted those districts in depth. They've contacted the fire district, they've contacted the school, and Doug Neely's information has value also. So I don't want to redo what's already been accomplished. It's like, how do this is all about expansion and understanding. And again, it's going to come down to project based it has to be kept simple for the general public. They are never going to become urban renewal experts given its complexity. Thanks.
Neither are we.
Sam.
Again, a great point by Commissioner O'Donnell. And another one that I want to follow up with, just in terms of, if we start talking about projects, and urban renewal owned properties, such as the houses, for example, the empty lots, those are very much their policy decisions, informed by, to run back to a previous point, that sort of vision for the area. And certainly I think part of the value in this next phase is to identify exactly what the community wants to do with some of those kind of opportunities, for lack of a better word. Is it those small wins, those small projects that kind of build community support and momentum and build transparency, which is one of the deficiencies that have sort of popped up. Identifying a few projects that really build that return on investment as well, which help with the timeline, which helps build towards the overall goal of the plan, while acknowledging that we have a need to get that return on investment versus the community-based amenities that don't necessarily achieve the same return on investment, and in doing so, that timeline accelerates because the district can be closed faster. Some of those things are the things that we can dive into, in a little bit more of a focused manner in the next month or so. So I think something that would really be useful for us is to kind of nail down what those specific questions or pertaining to deficiencies might be. How can we really address those in the next course of action? I think we've got a pretty good understanding of what some of those things are. Things like the city hall, use of funds for public buildings, lack of transparency, etc. I'll stop there. Does anybody want to respond to that? There's a little bit of a rambled response.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
I don't know if it's a direct response to that, but honestly, you need to be able to answer with a factual answer. For example, if each student now gets $6,000, would that student get more if urban renewal didn't exist, or would they still get the same amount, only we would unburden some other source of revenue that the state uses to fulfill that? And I think in the school thing, that needs to be a very concrete answer. In the fire district, there's people, the critics will say, if they had the urban renewal money, they would not have to go out for these bonds because they'd already have those monies. And those are the kind of criticism that need to be addressed directly. They're either true or false, or they're misguided or they're correct. And I think we need to really give definitive answers to those things.
I'd like to respond to that quickly.
Go right ahead.
I'd like to push back a little bit on whether that it's a yes or no answer, because in the case of urban renewal, and I think this is part of the reason why urban renewal it becomes such a kind of convoluted or controversial topic to many, is that the answer is really it depends, because it depends on the timeline. If you're looking at anything in the immediate term, and we say, you shut down the district and that student gets X amount of money, and what are the impacts at any given point? That's different to saying, if we have a successful urban renewal district that is founded in community principles and values and goals, and working towards something that the community wants, and builds the tax base at such point that district closes down, that student's probably going to get a lot more money than, well, not necessarily a lot more money, but it's those impacts are going to be greater were it not for urban renewal. And that's a harder message to get across. And that message is, I think, consistent, not just for schools, it's for every taxing district. And I think for the most part, taxing districts, they understand that. And I think that's where the conversation about return on investment comes into play a lot. I think those are reflected in the conversations that we've had. So yeah, that's all.
I think another hard component here is, how do you account for any investment that was made by the district that led to the creation of additional jobs? So since Oregon takes money in through property tax or through income taxes, how do you offset that, right? So, I mean, one argument is that through urban renewal, you're pulling forward potentially investment or development that I would argue, well, it's going to happen at some point, right? It's interesting that it's always a one-way argument, whereas potentially there were investments made in the district that directly led to job creation that exceeded what would have happened organically or would not have happened yet. And how do you account for that on the subtraction side of those revenues that are now going to the state through income taxes, which are not sequestered through the district?
Yeah.
I think you make a good point. I mean, one of the things that I think our public has a hard time understanding is, and something that's I still don't totally understand, is the school district really hasn't done a good job of explaining to its constituents in the district where its money actually comes from, because otherwise some of this myth would not keep existing.
Mm-hmm.
The school funding formula is complicated. I don't even want to get into it, but it would be helpful. We were able to work with them to get the community to say, well, okay, here's where the money really comes from. And then following up on Mr. Conkle's statement as well. There's too many variables in there that are getting, in my opinion, dumped on a renewal when it's not really the cause of what people think is the problem. Mr. O'Donnell.
And quite honestly, I would agree with what Mr. Brookham and Mr. Conkle say. I mean, you can have a short-term effect where it's like, oh, we raised the frozen limit or freed it up, and everybody sees an immediate cash influx. But the long-term effect is if these things, as to rephrase what Mr. Conkle said or Mr. Brookham, we generate jobs, we generate property taxes, and as such, in the long term, we're more successful in contributing to the welfare of those taxing districts.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, we're going to deal with a public who's not prepared to deal with these complexities. When we put forth our proposal, we need to address their concerns, and hopefully we need to overcome those, if we want this to continue, the most vocal opponents by giving them something they can support. And again, that becomes project-based. So good observations by both Mr. Brookham and Mr. Conkle. Thank you.
So where do we want to go? I mean, I halfway agree with Commissioner O'Donnell, but I don't think we're quite ready to discuss projects. We need to have more understanding about what our plan is. And I know I'm going to spend some time rereading our 58-page urban renewal plan. I've got some of it read it over the years, but not really looked at it from this particular standpoint. So I think we need some base information, and we need to go back and look at the vision statement or whatever statement we have in there. I was just trying to look it up to see what the premise was and see if that's still valid.
Well, remember what we can do, what we can do is generated, it's not citywide. We have an urban renewal district currently, and we have the ability to expand that either contiguous or non-contiguous up to 8.9 acres. So, we're all on the same page as far as what projects do we pursue as a course of action.
I'm not in agreement with all the projects that we're going to pursue.
You say you're not in agreement with it?
No, I mean, I think the project list in there needs to be looked at.
Well, so do I. I think it needs to be complementary to the total vision, not a bunch of disconnected.
Yes, I agree. Not just little pieces all over the place.
I agree with that.
So Tony, does it sound like we have a direction or we're not? I'm looking at my notes. I've been taking notes.
I guess I'd defer a little bit to Sam and James and kind of what they're hearing.
So just a quick note on, as we're talking about projects here, without, certainly don't want to jump the gun and jump straight into very specific projects. I think as we talk about projects and things like prioritization, what we're really talking about is project categories. We're not, we wouldn't be going out to the community and saying, hey, broader public Oregon City residents, tell us all of the projects in this specific site or these, specific streetscape components that you want. It's more, again, like sort of that project-based approach. Is it infill? Is it site specific? Is it, the water, activating the waterfront or something like that? Whereas, I think the next step beyond that would be to hash out those projects, if depending on the which direction the commission takes that information. So it's really about delving into those project categories a little bit deeper. And I think part of the process of looking at the original plan is to look at those original projects, put them into those categories, so we avoid kind of getting into the minutia a little bit. I understand they are very disaggregated They're not really. I think a lot of the plans that we've worked on, and I think Andy would agree, with the projects that he's worked on, tends to be a policy decision to avoid getting too broadly specific, because either you get 13 years down the line and all of a sudden you've kind of forced yourself into a corner where you have these very specific projects that no longer apply or have varying levels of support from the broader public. So that's something that we can discuss going further, or going forwards, and delving into. So I think, as throwing it back to the commission here, do you think we have enough information and enough direction to explore project categories?
James?
Well, based on what I'm hearing, I've been trying to take some copious notes here in terms of this conversation, but based on what I'm hearing, it sounds as if it's important that we visit the sins of the past with urban renewal, recognize where it went wrong, and then recognize where it's gone right. Also with the understanding that there's no such thing as perfection in anything we do. Also, based on this conversation, is to develop a vision that it's really not project-based, but the vision leads us toward an end where whatever comes out of the vision, we have projects that fit together and are not sporadic pieces of activity. And also the understanding that visioning is a very complicated process. And actually you can make it as complicated as you want, visioning, or as simple as you want. Because just like any retirement plan that any of us might have, we know when we want to retire based on the plan. We know how much money we want to get to make us feel comfortable about retirement. And also we want to know what does it look like when we get to retirement. It's not very much different from a visioning for urban renewal. It's practically the same. So whatever you choose, it should create jobs, for instance. It should broaden the tax base no matter what you do. It should enhance the profit, other properties around it, no matter what you do. If it fits into that, if you have a vision and you choose projects that fit into those holes, and then people know exactly what you want, and you can market the urban renewal district based on those very finite points, no matter what the project is, just as long as it meets the criteria that you've agreed to. And whether it's a big project or a small project, the issue there is in the details. The details are always important in a development agreement, no matter what it is. And it's important to ask any developer hard questions about what they know and what they can do, and I guess the basic question when you ask it when you involve developers is that when you get into trouble, how do you get out? What is your plan? Because you are going to get into trouble. There's no such thing as perfection in any project. So you've touched on a number of items here, but you have some very fundamental themes. I mean, sins of the past, developing a vision, not to make sure that you don't have sporadic projects that don't complement each other. I mean, you have some fundamental, and that leads you into that discussion with the public, because Mr. O'Donnell is right. You can't expect the citizens of today, who are very busy, to be experts in urban renewal, and they're looking to you as the commission to lead them and to help them make the decision and not hide behind them. They're looking to you for direction. And also you have to be careful of trying to end the urban renewal district just to pay the taxing district off quickly. If there's a move toward that, then that may be ill-fated. If you simply just want to end the district so that taxing districts can get money. That's what I'm hearing. So they're looking to you for leadership. They're looking for you to direction, and that's important.
I think that was it was a good summation. I've just been scanning the current urban renewal plan, and it says that it's based on the 2004 futures report, which actually was developed by Leland Consulting. I don't have a good recollection of that document, but in just looking through it, not their futures plan, but just looking through our plan, section 400 talks about relationship to local objectives, and it has a purpose statement, which is very general, and then it launches into the comp plan. So I think, again, we can all take a look at that for our next meeting. We need to plan when we're going to have a meeting, and I think we probably need to have one sooner than later. Take a look at that, look at the project lists, look at other things in this plan to see if they still ring true. If they don't ring true, then we can make a note that that's something that needs to be changed. And I think some basic fundamental information that we already talked about would be very helpful so that we can frame the discussion. I will be participating in the 2040 meeting tomorrow night, and we will be talking about sort of a vision. The other thing I think would be helpful is that we haven't had an update for a while on where the economic development strategy is, and this obviously ties into that as well.
You want to update now? I'm sure you don't want to update now. Do you want to update now?
Mr. Conkle?
No, let's stay focused on what
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest, but I wanted to hear your opinion.
Can I ask my questions?
Yes.
Thank you. So I feel like we've been wandering through the desert around all over the place and not really heading toward any conclusions. I thought Mr. Graham did an excellent job of kind of summarizing where we're at and this whole conversation, but I still feel like we don't have a path forward. And so Sam or Anise, if maybe you could put the schedule back up there and talk about what the next steps are, because I'm wondering, like, I feel like you are prompting us to tell you, what should we ask the community next? And so I guess my question is I know this project's got to be coming to an end. I kind of feel like you have enough information at this point to come up with multiple alternatives for us to consider. So I'm wondering, and you've already asked the community about categories because it was in your survey, and essentially every category got almost equal interest, you know, and so I'm trying to move us forward and think of how are we getting to the end goal. I feel like we have a lot of information, it's just not being pulled together, and I'm not sure what the community can tell us at this point without us coming back to them with something really tangible and valuable, like alternatives. Like one alternative is we close the district. One alternative is we're resetting. I'm making this up. I don't even know if it should be an alternative, but you know, we're resetting the baseline to help whatever taxing districts, and therefore we'll move forward. And then the third one is we're going to keep the urban renewal district, but you know, here's how we're going to improve upon it, realizing our, as Mr. Graham would say, our sins of the past, but here's where we think we can focus on the future and how we can make improvements. Like, I'm just trying to figure out, it's just not clear to me, even through this conversation, of what really useful information. We can't even agree on whether or not we're asking them about projects or not. So I just, I feel like this group needs to solidify a little bit more about where we're going and how we get there, before we just go out to the public. And I'm interested in input from Sam and Anise as to how do you see this project ending? How do we get this to some conclusion that we can make some decisions on and have, because I feel like if we had alternatives, we would still want to go back out to the community and ask them what they think about those alternatives. And I don't know if you've planned that in this project of like 2 more rounds of community outreach and review and input. So.
I can, yeah, I'll respond quickly to that. Those alternatives analysis absolutely is something that was in our sort of on our to-do list. And I think part of the reasoning for sort of going back out with a more in-depth round of discussions, it was in part to, well, because in response to some of the concerns of the commissioners to the participation of the community at large in some of these outreach events. It is my belief, our belief, that we have enough information to develop those alternatives and actually present those, and are at a pretty good point where we think, with not too much more time and effort, we can provide something of real substance to the commission to, make a pretty concrete decision. So, if the commission members, commissioners think that we should just go ahead and flesh out those alternatives, and that can be a concrete next step, then we're certainly happy to do that. I think the projects come within a subset of those alternatives, right? That's one of those options that we can move on from.
I don't know whose hand. I think Commissioner O'Donnell's hand was up first.
Well, I think you have to make a plan of action, and I agree with Mr. Graham. You address the sins of the past. You address specific concerns, the things that killed urban renewal last time, and those are taxing districts, whether they be school funding, fire districts. You address something Mr. Neely said, which is this thing of having no end date is problematical. It's a source of criticism. So then the question is, and the options, okay, what are our options? I'm afraid that if you just say you want to end it or not end it, everybody will just say, just end it. And I agree with Mr. Graham. I mean, that's really not the optimum solution, but again, we're governed by the public. There's options. There is the option of ending it. There's the option that came up in one of our many meetings about resetting the base, maybe freeing up some numbers, but some of the TIF we've generated, but not all of it. So the other thing we must do, we're talking to a very limited audience who are their propensity is to support urban renewal already, but they are whatever they are, 1% of the total population or less. We have got to expand our audience. But in the end, I'll say it for the umpteenth time, the general public are not going to become experts in this. We will be called upon to lead, and our challenge is acknowledging the will of the community and hopefully getting support for something I think that would serve us well. Thanks.
Commissioner Neely, did you have your hand up?
The only thing I was going to suggest is maybe if there could be a synthesis of this that could be emailed out to us before our next meeting. I agree with Rachel that we were going various directions on this discussion, but whether there could be a synthesis of what we were talking about, send it out to us in the form of an email so that we maybe can move into agreement how to go in the next meeting.
Mr. Cross? Do you have anything you want to add? Commissioner Smith? Well, I think we Well, to be honest with you, I wasn't quite as lost as Commissioner Lyle Smith, but Mr. Graham just repeated and reiterated everything that I said earlier on. So let's move forward with that premise of the way Mr. Sam has outlined it and get on to the next step. I've got all this information right here in front of me that I've been kind of looking at while you've all been talking. So we do know a lot of things. And I think that we should build on that base and go from there. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're not asking for another big push, but Commissioner Lyle Smith did ask to put the schedule back up on so let's just take a quick look at that again.
It
Middle of
looks,
the presentation somewhere, so.
yeah, it looks like oh, hang on a sec, sorry.
Hope you were going to say you deleted it. So.
Technical difficulties.
Yes, technical difficulties. Okay. So we may, I don't know, does this move at all? Because I'm just thinking where we want to be looking is kind of from December over, which we're covering it up right here on the side. I guess I could make that smaller on my screen, see the whole thing. So yeah, there we go.
So I guess for the benefit of everybody on this call, can James and Sam kind of summarize what they think we're doing next, please? So I can get agreement from everybody.
Yes. Ideally, with this information and direction that we will confirm hopefully in the next few days, we'll target a community workshop towards the end of February, which will follow another commission meeting where we'll dive into this a little bit more in detail. But we'll revisit the plan and the vision in that original plan and those projects to come up with some more specific questions and outreach topics to bring to the community. And that's pretty much that's like the roadmap for the next month. I think beyond that, we want to be bringing those specific alternatives to the commission to be making a decision not much longer after that final community workshop. So we're looking at April.
Are you suggesting that we have this discussion after the workshop or before the workshop?
Preferably before, so we can really target that workshop as to delve into that information, really.
Well, that's what I was thinking, that we'd have to have it before.
Yeah.
Commissioners, do you agree with that?
Yes.
So our next task would be to find a date.
Well, hold on, I guess.
I'm not saying right this minute. I'm just saying that I'm just talking out loud. We need to find a date to do that before the workshop. So.
Okay, I think Commissioner Rocky Smith has his hand up there.
Yeah, I'm making him bigger because I've got everybody minimized so I can see the screen.
Yep.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
So it's listed, there's 2 community workshops. One of those is the OCBA event. Is that correct?
That's not a community workshop, but a community meeting.
Okay.
Or presentation, my apologies.
Good. I didn't think.
Okay, so the community workshops are separate from that.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. So I guess going back to my comment earlier about, really to me, this has been the most important question, is how do we respond to the voters that said stop using urban renewal? that's all that I care about finding out really first before we move on. And if we're not getting that response from the current groups of people we've talked to, then we need to find out how to get out to that group of people that voted against urban renewal. And that needs to be done through that online survey or through those community workshops. Because if we don't get some response on how they feel, then I don't think any of this is going to be helpful in the end. Because basically what we've collected so far is nothing different than anything I've seen in the last 10 years that we've debated about. So really, right now I voted on no on every urban renewal meeting. I voted against the urban renewal budget. I voted against the city budget. Until we answer that question to the voters that told us that we have to really change what we're doing, until we answer that specific question, I don't know how to go forward. So I hope that that's what we do in those online surveys or those community workshops, and really reach out to the people that have voted no in the last decade against urban renewal and find out why and what we need to do to fix it.
Well, unfortunately, so one of the answers is that they want us to do nothing.
Well, that's a possible answer, but that's not what I've seen.
I understand that.
May I?
Please.
So I just also want to reiterate more concretely 3 different alternatives or avenues of discussion for the community in this next phase. The first thing I heard was potentially verifying the vision for each of the projects that are included in the urban renewal plan. I myself am not super familiar with exactly the sections, Denise, that you were looking into, but that is a potential avenue. The second is identifying, Rachel, this was from you, identifying 3 different alternatives for the urban renewal district, whether it's closing the district, amending the district, or keeping it open as is. There's also opportunity to kind of flesh out what those 3 alternatives might look like, and then have a discussion with the community about those alternatives that would be partly informational and educational about pros and cons, and then just having these alternatives to prioritize or identify elements that you like of each. And then the last is prioritizing project types. Now, we had mentioned earlier that there was already a beginning discussion about overall what types of projects would you like to see urban renewal funds directed towards. There was no prioritization of those project types. It was primarily just choose all that you like. So there is room or opportunity to move that one step further and work more in a prioritization exercise around those different types of projects. So those are kind of 3 avenues that I'm hearing in terms of engagement with the community. And really, based on that, what is, I guess, what is the most helpful?
May I interrupt? I'm comment first.
Please go ahead. We're having a free-flowing discussion here.
Well, I'm going to have to get out of the free-flowing discussion. This is my 57th wedding, our 57th wedding anniversary. The meal's about to arrive, and I'm going to leave the meeting. But what she's outlined there, I think, is good. In terms of Rocky's comments, I don't think we can go to the community unless we can present these particular broad alternatives that she is talking about. Otherwise, there's nothing to really have a dialogue about with the community. And I'm sorry, but I have to leave.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
Happy anniversary. Oh, we left. Can I clarify just for the record? I only said 3 because I was throwing out 3. If the team has more, I was making it up off the top of my head, but you guys are the experts, and like you said, you feel like you have a lot of information. So I trust for you guys to put something together, because you are supposed to be helping us through this, and I would like to see what you put together as the alternatives, as someone with a lot of knowledge, and I'm sure Mr. Graham can contribute there too. So the diagram says online survey. I think it says 2 of 3. Is there another survey? Does the schedule go on after March? Or am I reading that wrong?
So the idea is that I think the online surveys are paired with a specific goal of any particular phase. So it may be that we carry on the second survey through the third workshop, but we may implement a third specialized or specific to the very end of the project. So that's it.
So it sounds to me like we're going to come back at a meeting in February and you're going to present to us options or what you're planning to bring to the community workshop number 2, and we're going to give you feedback on that based on everything that you heard tonight. Is that true? Is that next steps?
By and large, I think that's it.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Commissioners, are you in agreement with that? Okay, I see thumbs up. Good. Okay. Is there anything else we want to have a discussion about on this particular topic, or shall we move on to items 3, 4, and 5? Okay,
Do our
if not,
consultants need anything?
project team, do you have anything else you want to add? Okay, Mr. Graham or Mr. Conkle?
Oops, I think Anise had something.
Okay, Anise.
No, sorry. I just wanted to express that we do look forward to meeting with our project team to just discuss next steps. And I definitely create an outline for what we want to be presenting to you come February. So we have a very clear path forward for this next phase. The purpose, just once again, for this presentation this evening was to report back on what we had been hearing and also just provide you an overview of the cumulative comments and questions primarily that we've been hearing through this process. And then from that, really help with your collaboration, start teasing out the topics that you think are the most important for you to receive feedback on from the community. So we have some fodder from this discussion. We have fodder from what we've done in the past, but we do need to kind of come to a conclusion about what makes sense in terms of asking folks in the next step. So very much appreciate the conversation, and we really look forward to meeting back with the project team to discuss that.
I guess the one thing I'd add, I appreciate where Commissioner Rocky Smith's coming from as to try to get an understanding of why folks voted no, right? I guess what I would ask is, when I think about that and conversations that I've part of or heard of, there's no end date to the district, right? We didn't like how what money was spent on. We didn't like the way decisions were made. It takes from the schools. I guess if I could ask each of you, you have a lot of folks that you've probably had conversations with over the years as we've, gone through citizen initiatives and ballot measures. Because I guess I just, those seem to be the ones that I've heard the most about. And so I don't know if there's more to go find there, right? And I guess I would just ask, like, if there's something or you've thought about or you've heard or you think, please just think about it and pass it along to us, because trying to track down, or you might be right, Commissioner Smith, people just don't want it. Maybe that is the answer, and we're searching for something that isn't here, right? So I think that's where we need to make some of these decisions about, how much do we continue to try to, continue to find more questions and answers that may or may not be there, or when do we say,
enough is enough?
Identified these are significant in nature, and let's address those. And so I guess that's, that's going to depend on each of you to determine where you're comfortable at as we're going through this process. But, I just want to make sure that we're setting a realistic expectation that all of a sudden the consultants aren't going to go out, or we're going to somehow go out and find the people who voted no and know exactly why. There were so many different dynamics and election politics and changing demographics. It's a hard thing, but I think we have some concrete things that we know.
Give you an example. I heard from constituents that they didn't know what it was, so they just voted no. There wasn't a concerted program to say, these are the good things Urban Renewal did. And so when I started going down the list, the people I talked to would say, oh, I wish I'd known that. I said, well, you see this place, and I was pointing out, this did this. Oh, by the way, did you know Urban Renewal helped 7th Street Corridor? Did you know Urban Renewal did this? And it was like, wow. So there was no selling going on, because we can't as a jurisdiction sell it, but we didn't also have a group of citizens who were out there telling the story. So that's a lot of what I heard. I did hear the one about the schools. I didn't hear any of the ones about no end date. It was just like, we don't know what it was, so we just voted no. Anyway, so anything else before we move on? Mr. O'Donnell, is your hand still up from before, or this is a new hand?
No, it's new.
Okay.
I agree with what you just said. I mean, one of the things we have to put forward in the community is, what have we accomplished, so that because there is none of that, as you just said. And then we also have to put forth, these are possible things we would like to accomplish. And in the absence of urban renewal, we would have to forego those. I mean, that statement needs to be made. Here's how we intend to use it, something of this nature with your approval. And then the other thing is, and if the district were to be closed, these projects would be much less possible or impossible. You have to link it to concrete things versus concepts without reality. So.
Right. Okay. All right.
And I don't want to, and I know that the whole funding of schools and other districts is a difficult one, right? I mean, it's where you have so many different variables going into it and so many cause and effects that may or may not be a positive or negative in each jurisdiction, that it's hard to, I think, to nail this specifically down. I just want to be thoughtful that, we do work with our partners here, and we've reached out to them and we've received their input. And what's interesting is we could close the district, and it doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be more money put into schools.
No, it doesn't.
There's absolutely no guarantee that would happen. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Right.
That's how I phrased the question before. It's like, is there really an impact if we close the district? And then the discussion we had about short-term freeing up of funds versus long-term generation of additional funds by increasing the tax base. And it gets so complex that I think the public will get lost in that.
I agree. Well, thank you so much for having a discussion with us, and I hope that it wasn't as convoluted as some of my colleagues stated. I said I've got notes here. I've got points that I kept checking when we kept coming back to it again. So I think we will end this, and Mr. Conkle, you're going to help us find a date in the future later on that we can have another meeting before, as per their request. I guess they're going to meet in the project team and get back to you and Mr. Graham.
Yes, ma'am. All
right. Let's move on then to, we have some minutes that we need to take a look at from September, October, and December.
Just to confirm, I think we can head off as consultants. Is that okay?
Wonderful. Yes, absolutely. Unless you're really excited about the minutes. I think your name is mentioned in them, so maybe you want to stay tuned.
I'd love to lie and say yes, but I'll take this opportunity. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
So do we have any, anybody have any concerns about the minutes from September 16th, October 7th, and December 2nd of 2020. Did anybody want to make a motion to approve them all individually or all in one swoop? Don't make Katie cry now.
I move to approve the minutes from September 16th, October 7th, and December 2nd, 2020.
Second,
There's a motion. Is there a second?
second.
Second by Commissioner Smith. Any further discussion? Katie, would you call a roll, please?
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Sean Cross,
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Lyle Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
and since Commissioner Doug Neely is out of the meeting now, we will go to Chair Denise McGriff.
Aye. All right, the minutes are approved. And do we have any communications, Mr. Conkle? I was just reading the minutes, of course, very carefully, and had you been able to make any contact with our friends at Recap?
Yes, myself, Mr. Graham, and Mr. Pete Walter from Planning met with representative from RestoreCap. We provided them, and I had an initial discussion with the president of RestoreCap, Mr. Rob Marini. I had provided him some information related to not only urban renewal properties, but also city properties that had frontage along either the Willamette, the Clackamas, or the Cove, just for discussion purposes. So then myself, Mr. Graham, Mr. Walters had a meeting with representative from RestoreCap and John Vance. Oh, why am I drawing a blank? He did the work originally for the Urban Renewal District. And so I had a good conversation with them. They're taking some time. They asked for about 2 to 3 weeks to kind of sit back, to kind of review the information that's available, review the work that they had done before, and then reach back out to us to schedule another meeting for a follow-up. So once we have that scheduled and we've had that meeting, I can give you an update at that point. But they were receptive and open, had some really good conversations with them. And yeah, just look forward to see what they bring back to the table.
Are there any questions or follow-up on that meeting with RestoreCap? So it sounds like it's moving forward, which is good. They haven't said yes, they haven't said no, but making forward momentum, which is good. Are there any other communications?
No, ma'am.
Commissioners, anything from any of you? So I think one thing that Commissioner O'Donnell said that I don't know if there's a total consensus on this, but I think that it's worth saying again that Frank's going, what did I say that I'm going to say again? So when we talked about projects, we did say to the commission, to the staff, that we were not going to be entertaining any offers at this point in time on our properties until we figured this out. So it's not going to stop people from contacting us or contacting the city and saying, hey, we've got this great idea. But I think, again, as Mr. Graham has stated, Mr. Conkle has stated, and also Mr. O'Donnell, is that when we get to that point to where we are entertaining proposals, I think we will have a better grounding if we move forward with this. We will have requirements, we will have substance to say, here's what we want. If that's something that you want to do, we are happy to work with you. So that we have a framework for how we are going to look at our properties. Because I think the way, no disrespect to the companies and individuals that have come to us and said, hey, I've got this great idea. As was previously stated, we're looking at it piecemeal. We want to have a plan and we want to have a program, and we want to say, here's your RFQ. If you can do this for us, this is fantastic, or your RFP or whatever we're going to do. I think that's something that we've talked about, and I think it's something that that we will have further discussion about, but that's just the comment that I just wanted to make about that. And if there's anybody else who wants to say anything before we entertain a motion to adjourn, please feel free.
Just want to say thanks to Commissioner O'Donnell for chairing.
He's not getting off that easy.
Thanks for Commissioner McGriff for taking the helm.
You're not getting off that easy, Mr. O'Donnell. Mr. Graham, did you have some parting comments for us?
He was just giving a clap out.
Oh, oh, that's the clapping. Okay, sorry. All right, do we have a consensus to adjourn?
Aye.
All right, I guess we are adjourned. Thank you, Mr. Conkle. Thank you, Ms. Riggs. Thank you, Mr. Graham.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Night.
We know you're there.
All right.
Thank you all. We'll see you